Start. See now. So I'm sorry to interrupt you all, but we have to start. It's 11:30 and we're ready. So welcome everyone. It's a great pleasure to see you. And it's an even greater pleasure to present my guests today. This is, I think you know her, this is Hege Cathrine Finholt, and she is a professor of philosophy here at MF. And then it's Katrin Lossleben, who's a professor of feminist research at the University of Tromsø. And the topic of their talk today is gender diversity, equity and inclusion in academia, a conceptual framework for sustainable transformation. And this is also the title of a recently published book with Routledge, which they have partly edited and partly contributed to. So I look very much forward to hearing from you. And as you all know, we have 13 minutes for presentation and 13 minutes for questions and answers. And if you want to pose a question, there's a microphone over here, and you can also use the chat function if you are with us digitally. Please.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's really a great pleasure to be here and to present the book over which I met also Hege, which is a pleasure for me on so many levels. The guidebook that we are going to present today is the outcome of a RCN research project which ran under the Balance program. It had the title, which was initially meant ironically prestige. I don't know whether we get through all the time. And it was led by Kenneth Ruud at the University of Tromsø, the UIT. So he was the official project leader, but the project coordinator was Melina Duarte, who did an amazing job with the project. So Balance, as you might know, but maybe do not know, is a program that was initiated by the Research Council to promote gender equality in top positions in academia and gender perspectives in research and innovation. It ran from 2012 to 22 and will be continued as Balance Plus with a focus on diversity from 2023 on until 2028. So I had my new position at the UIT, was eager to get some funding, and we decided to apply in this program. Then we had to look at what happens at the UIT and how can we improve the gender balance in top positions there. And we found out that there were about 40% women in top positions. So that was a pretty amazing number. And the reason why that number was so good was because the UIT initially was really bad in representing women. So they had geared up and had taken some measures to promote women in top positions, like, for example, writing retreats, that what is called the Oppruk program, promotion program. I think they also paid for barnevakt, children's childcare. So a lot had happened, and we asked, so is there still a problem? We have 40%. But when we had a closer look at what happened, then we realized that we still had old patterns, like women in the humanities, men in the STEM disciplines, men leading huge projects, women leading smaller projects, men doing the research bit and writing articles, while the women were doing the administrational bit and were also in teaching, doing a lot of the care work. So what we then could frame was that we didn't want a change in numbers, but we wanted a change in culture. And this is a change in culture happens maybe in small situations, and we often find ourselves in situations where something happens and we have a feeling of that was awkward. Something went wrong, but we don't have immediately a name for the problem. And all these tiny little moments make a culture. So we wanted to create a book which ran under the heading of Kimberly Crenshaw, who said, we all know that where there's no name for a problem, you cannot see a problem. And when you cannot see a problem, you pretty much cannot solve it. So this is what the book does. It gives the concepts and it fills the concepts with content. Together with 20 authors, we decided to write that book. It's edited by Melina Duarte, Kjersti Fjørtoft, and me. And one of the authors is Hege, and the 19 others are from Europe and the Americas. So that's the problem, and who is going to solve it? And the next question is, who is it for? So equality or diversity work does not only happen in the Equal Opportunities Office, but it happens in very many moments and among very many persons. It happens on an organizational, an intergroup, and an interpersonal level. Equality happens in the classroom, when you design a course or a program, when someone is in a hiring committee, when someone writes a tender note, when a leader negotiates the requirements of the leader group and their employees, or when someone is a person of trust in a case of misconduct. And that's what the book tries to do. It tries to work it tries to convey complicated messages in a rather simple question, so that each person who is not an expert in gender equality work or diversity work, or who is not a professor of feminist research, will take this book and will read it through when they have the feeling that something has gone wrong, or how can they prepare for something that needs to be done better. Yeah, so that's the book. That's what we try to do.
Yeah, so I'll spend a few minutes talking about the article that I have in the book, which is on stereotype threat. So the book has many different articles, and each article ends with some questions that people can think about in their own institution based on what the article is bringing up. So what I am bringing up, is the sound okay? Yeah. So what I'm bringing up is the stereotype threat, which is a term coined by Claude Steele, an American Chicago University professor of social psychology. It's been picked up by many people, so it's so common now to talk about that people forget that it's Claude Steele who actually coined it, but it is. Jennifer Saul, she explains it in the following. Victims of stereotype threat underperform on the relevant tasks because they are unconsciously preoccupied by fears of confirming the stereotypes of their group. So still, he points out that these kind of stereotypes that we're talking about are threatening people, and they're just hovering in the air. They're not verbally articulated, but they're just in the air we breathe. So some examples are: women are worse at math than men. Women are worse at city parking than men. And men are less emotionally aware than women. Things like this. We all know stereotype. And some of you who went to the CASR talk, we learned from Olav Elgvin that stereotypes are true, which I beg to disagree. because some of them are actually threatening to people's performance. So that's what Claude Steele and Cian Baylock, who's also picked up on this, want to show, that it does something to your ability to perform at your best. So while we have tools to sort of do something with the gender imbalance, for example, earmarking positions, this will not actually solve this kind of problem if we don't manage to remove the stereotype threat that actually threatens people's performance. So what I explore in this article is the extent to which this actually might be one of the explanations for why there are fewer women in academia than men. And we have some numbers. So my numbers are from 2019, so they might have changed. But according to statistics in Norway, those who applied for postdoctoral positions at academic institutions from 2016 to 2018, only 29% were women. For PhD positions and professorships, the number is 33% and 50% for associate professor. For teaching positions, full-time lecturer, the number of female applicants is 60%. In 2019, in Norway, women held only 32% of the full professorships, whereas 48% of the associate professorships were held by women. The good news is that there is an increase of female professors, but the increase is quite slow. It is reasonable to claim that the number should have been higher given the high number of female students, and most importantly, among completed PhDs, there has been at least almost a 50-50 balance between men and women since 2012. So what can we do about this? So then again, stereotype threat might be an area where we can actually do something. So changing or getting rid of stereotype threat cannot be left to the victims of stereotype threat. It's we as a society that has to change that. And we as an academic culture has to change that. So what can we do? Luckily, according to Steele, it's not that difficult to fix this problem. We don't need a bunch of money and resources to do it, but we need a willingness to take some measures based on what we know, and some willingness to actually make some mental investigations into ourselves and see how can we change this. So I think there are at least 3 things that we can do. We need a cultural awareness and a change so that the non-verbal part of the institutional culture do not nurture stereotype threats, but rather remove them. The second part is maybe the most interesting, and that is hiring procedures. Earmarking positions might sometimes be a good tool, but it does not remove the stereotype threat. It might, in fact, nurture it. So instead, we need to do something else. One thing is that one has to think about the wording of the job ads. And I know that at least this is something that MF has been thinking about, at least according to our rector. So we know that gender-neutral language is more welcoming to both genders or all genders than gender-specific language. And words of expressions that are associated with the masculine, like leader, dominant, competitive, appeal less to women, whereas words that are associated with the feminine, such as support and interpersonal, appeal to both women and men. Not only women, but both women and men. We also know that this idea that people had some time ago, that putting a woman on the hiring committee is going to solve the problem. We know that it doesn't solve the problem. Sometimes it works against itself. But what we do know is that clear criteria to the committee on what they should look for is actually helpful, because it's in the establishment of these criteria that we're able to remove stereotype traits. So based on this, we don't necessarily need a new law or a different guideline, but we need to be aware of the ways in which we interpret the laws and the declarations in a way that is actually conducive for removing stereotype traits. So in this case, my sense is that the DORA declaration is of value and should be used as much as possible. And I'm guessing that many people don't know what the DORA declaration is, but you should look it up. And then the third that I'm not going to talk too much about, that is what to do when you have actually managed to attract both men and women to these positions. How do you deal with them? What do you do? Well, you need to have an institution, a cultural framework that puts this potential to use. Some have programs aimed at supporting junior scholars. Some of these programs in some institutions are catered to women only, and that might sometimes make sense. It doesn't mean that that nurtures the stereotype threat, but because women have worked so long, one could say, to fight these stereotype threats themselves, it might be necessary for them to have this kind of program to actually support them based on the potential that they have, not because they are women, but because they have this potential to succeed. And then, of course, there are all kinds of other stereotype threats. Very often we hear that women are so good at administrative work, so this is why women do that more than men do. So that is very odd, I think, because just because you're really good at doing the dishes, should you always be the one doing the dishes? Can those who are not good at it learn it and do a good enough job? I think so. So these kind of stereotypes are sort of hovering in the air, and we need to think about them and try to remove them. So that's the idea.
Thank you so much.